Welcome to the instructional video on how to do our draft this season. First, let me thank all of you commissioners for being commissioners this year and for committing to a stack-free league. The purpose of this video is to show you exactly how to do a draft, to help you encounter problem areas and address those, and frankly, to save me some time. So now we'll go on to the draft. However, before you begin the draft, about a week before, you should send an email to all the coaches in your age group with the following information. You should tell them all the players and their ratings so that they're able to look at those ratings and ask them for their input. After you get their emails back, you should update the ratings and then bring those to the draft, but also send those to your coaches one more time so that everyone comes to the draft with the correct ratings. Prior to the draft, you'll need a couple things you should bring along. One would be, make sure that there's a dry erase board available, such as this one right here. Make sure you've got markers. Make sure you've got an eraser and a straight edge so you can create these beautifully straight lines as I've created right here. And also an egg timer or cell phone, anything that's got a timer would be a good idea as well to keep the draft moving. Finally, make sure you bring extra copies of the draft. Yes, coaches will arrive and not have their papers ready to draft players without any information. As you see, I set up the board today in a certain way. I allowed a bigger section at the top for the coach's information. I created columns and rows. The rows will be for each coach and the columns will be to line up the players. What we're going to do is we're going to write the coach's name on the top line, and right above them, if they've got a frozen player, we will then write that above there, which player is frozen. Underneath that, underneath the coach's name, we will also list their practice night. You'll see why later. Now we're at draft day. You're at the room. You've done everything right. You've brought your dry erase board and all your information. You've emailed the coaches. They're all there. We're ready to begin the draft. And now here we go. Before you begin the draft, here's what I recommend. You go over the draft procedure with the coaches. This will prevent them from getting confused, upset, and angry. And here's exactly how I would do it. I would start by saying, first off, before we begin the draft today, do we have any questions on the ratings, any final adjustments we need to make? Are you happy with the ratings that we have put for each player? No objections? Fine, we continue. Okay, we do have an objection. They think that so-and-so's score is half a score too high. They would like to take that player down from a 2 to a 2.5. What do you all think? Coaches, is so-and-so rated correctly? Yes or no? Sorry, Coach A. They think she's rated correctly, therefore her rating will stay as it was. No more objections, we'll begin the draft. But before we begin, let me go over the rules of the draft. Here's how the draft works. We will draft in every round from the lowest score to the highest score. Or, in other words, we will draft with the weakest team picking first in every single round. And that will happen every single round. Before we begin the draft, however, we will freeze all the coaches' players. And I'll explain that in a moment in greater detail. We're going to try to establish a 90-second time limit for each coach. Because if we don't, we'll be here all night. When you are ready to draft a player, you'll know you're on the clock. We'll ask you to please say, I'm drafting Emily Lawson. She's rated a 2. And she can't practice on Monday nights. Those 3 things list their name, their rating, and their can't practice night. This way we'll make sure that player does not get assigned to a team who is practicing that night. Finally, we don't allow assistant coaches. You cannot have your assistant prior to the draft. However, you are able to draft your assistant coach in the appropriate round. That is up to you when you decide to take them. But we will not put any assistant coaches on the board because that is a way to stack teams. And as you know as commissioners, we are against stacking. And finally, we ask you, guys, this is a recreational league. We ask you to be cooperative and to play nice with others. Today, if you don't get everybody you want, nobody will. We ask you just to cooperate, be happy, and try to be pleasant about the whole thing. It makes this draft go better, makes your life easier as a commissioner, and also will make it a lot more fun to finish this process up. The first thing you do when you begin the draft is to put the coaches' names with their practice night and their child's ratings. In this boy's draft, Coach Smith has a Monday practice and his son is listed as a .5. Coach Jones practices on Tuesdays. their son has a rating of 1. Coach Butler practices on Monday nights. His son is rated as a 1. Coach Smedlapper has a son rated as a 2, practicing on Tuesdays. Coach K practices Thursdays. His son Kyle is rated as a 3. And finally, our favorite coach, Bobby Knight, practices on Thursdays. His son Ned is a 2.5. A couple tips I want to give you as we begin the draft. One is you should have a helper with you working the draft. This person is responsible to make sure that you keep a running list of every player that's been drafted. This will help coaches in later rounds who draft players who've already been drafted. Second, it'd be good if they had a laptop so they could already drag and drop the players right onto the appropriate teams, then send an email out to you with a final list, or you could do it yourself. This way you don't have to write them all back down again at the end. As you're doing the draft, make sure that you always tell 2 people ahead who are drafting. So if Coach Smith is drafting, followed by Coach Jones, followed by Coach Butler, tell Coach Smith, you're on the clock with Coach Jones and Coach Butler next. And the final tip I'm going to give you would be to tell the coaches, once they've all agreed on the ratings, there is no crying in later rounds. One year I had a coach who, after we agreed on the ratings, then every single round complained that the 2 who was just drafted was really a 1. And the 3 she had drafted was really a 4. And this went on round after round after round. So you tell them, do you all agree with the ratings? Yes, you agree? Then I don't want to hear any more discussion about ratings. What you agree on now are their ratings for this draft. Now I will begin a mock draft to show you how you assign players, how you unfreeze players, how you total and decide who's drafting in each round. So at the beginning of this draft now, Coach Smith, Coach Jones, and Coach Butler each already have a 1. And actually Coach Smith has a 0.5. Their player is so strong that they're considered a 0.5. That happens once in a while. I had 2.5s last year in the, I had 2 players listed as a 0.5 last year in the 5th and 6th grade girls draft. Okay, so as we go across the board, we have 3 coaches here who don't have players. There is no obvious way to decide who should go first. So what we'll do is we'll take each of their names, which we have here on a piece of paper, we'll put them into a hat, we'll pull it out, and the first draft choice goes to Coach K.